Many nights I never even got away from the studio. I'd just sleep for 2 or 3 hours on the set. We do many as 30 or 40 takes of a scene without any explanation why he wanted to do it over again. And he'd just say, well, let's do it again. He wouldn't give them any new direction or anything of that nature. I suppose he was hoping that out of this would come an inspired performance on the part of the actor that would give him exactly what he was looking for, and that each new take of the scene might get closer to it. Sometimes he'd just get up and say, oh, to hell with it, just print them all.
Erich had a love scene with Fay Ray, and it was under an apple tree, and it was in blossom, supposedly. But this tree didn't have any blossoms on it, so he had apple blossoms made, thousands of them, out of wax. And he had a whole crew working for days putting the apple blossoms, you know, on the tree.
But the wedding march was not all sweetness and apple blossoms. Von Stroheim spent weeks behind closed sets, photographing bizarre orgies, scenes which have never been shown on any screen. The wedding march never reached completion. As von Stroheim fell months behind schedule, Pat Powers closed down the picture. While the studio tried to edit his material into usable form, von Stroheim looked for work around Hollywood. He had already alienated Paramount, MGM, Universal. When an offer did come, it was not from any studio, but from a star, Gloria Swanson. For her independent production company, he would film Queen Kelly, an incredible tale of a convent girl who inherits a brothel in German East Africa. Any other director coming out of a disastrous experience like the wedding march might have become cautious, but not von Stroheim.
I was director of photography on Queen Kelly for Miss Swanson, and the introduction scene of the picture was shot in exteriors at the Lasky Ranch, which is now a cemetery. And over a hill, we could see a group of convent girls, pupils, coming up the road. And from the other side, there was a detachment of cavalry of the mythical kingdom. So when they met with the prince of the country leading the cavalry, the girls stopped to curtsy to him. And while they were curtsying, Swanson, who was in the first row of the girls, her pants dropped on the floor. She got very embarrassed, got out of her trousers, rolled them up in a ball, and threw them at the prince, who was laughing at her. And he picked up, he caught the pants this way, smelled them and said, ah, and put them in his saddlebag. So Stroheim said, this is fine, this is a marvelous scene. And I didn't say anything. I said, photography will be all right, Erich. See how everybody likes it tomorrow. So in the production room, Mr. Kennedy, Joseph P. Kennedy, who was backing the picture, saw the scene, and he said, Mr. Ivanhoe, how do you like the scene? I said, the scene photographically looks beautiful. And he said, but then what's wrong with it? I said, I don't know if you'd be able to show it. Meantime, Stroheim was kicking me in the shins one way, and Gloria was kicking me the other way, but I had already said it, so it was too late. And Kennedy said, oh, I guess we'll get away with it. Well, they didn't.
The first scene was only a warning. Von Stroheim's script already contained some of his strongest material, but each day he would improve it just a little, von Stroheim style.
The set was a two-story set on the stage. Downstairs was a huge bar, as big as the bars in Tijuana, and they even had trees growing out of in the middle of the floor. And then up the steps was a long hallway. The first scene is of a sailor coming out of one of those rooms, tidying up his trousers, and the sailor goes down to the barroom, and there he meets Tully Marshall, who is the actual backer of the establishment. And he was a very strange character. In one pocket he had a bottle of cognac. In the other side he had a Luger strapped on, and he had a taxi locomotive. He was shaking all over. And he decides that he should marry the girl. So he goes and has a long scene with the aunt, then says, I have to marry your niece. During the marriage ceremony where a black priest is marrying him to Gloria, all of a sudden tobacco juice came out of Tully Marshall's mouth and hit Swanson's hand. And she said, Mr. Marshall. And he said, well, this is what Mr. von Stroheim wanted me to do. So Gloria vanished, and 20 minutes later, Mr. Kennedy, who was in Florida, called up Stroheim and said, thank you very much, this is all, we don't want to use you anymore.
Once again, von Stroheim was out. Swanson, minus a director, tried to complete the film herself. But by 1929, it was all unusable anyhow. The silent movie was finished. Talking pictures were taking over the industry. Now reeling from the twin disasters of The Wedding March and Queen Kelly, von Stroheim somehow had to re-establish himself in Hollywood. Unable to find work as a director, he made a fateful decision. He agreed to work as an actor in a low-budget talkie, Great Gabbo.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will now do the impossible. I will smoke a cigarette and drink water and at the same time use my voice. Very well done. All right, Herr Professor.
Da wird reins und bloß und das Herz und Schnauz und der Kackheit wär's voll hoch. Ah, 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 I'm laughing.
When von Stroheim really was more or less on the outs in Hollywood, I sold Mr. Laemmle the idea he should let me remake Blind Husbands with von Stroheim directing. This was, of course, the time when talking pictures had already started, and everybody knew how talking pictures were to be made. So I sat in my office when the assistant director came running, and he said, Paul, you better come over to the street where the bells are, because von Stroheim is going berserk. What is it? I rushed over there. Here was Von strutting up and down, breaking his cane. Another assistant gave him another cane. He broke the other cane. That was his sign of extreme displeasure. I said, Juan, what is it? He says, the bells. I said, what is it? He says, you told me I have to select the bells, because over, when we up there, the bells are ringing at 6 o'clock, and I have to have the bells. I said, fine, have you selected them? Yes, I want them all. I said, Juan, you can have only so many. Tell us those, the sounds of which you mean. What do you mean, the sounds? I want the bells up in Arrowhead, hanging over the lake. I said, you must be crazy, Juan. Why do you want to have the bells hanging over there? Because don't you know that bells sound different? The sound is different when it's over the water. I said, that may be the case, but that's not how you make talking pictures, sound pictures today. We record the sound of the bells, and then we lay that sound over the scene. He says, the next thing you're going to tell me that there isn't going to be a band playing while the dance is going on? I said, of course, Juan, the band will not be playing. There will be a band, and they will pretend to play, but the music will be recorded separately and also put on a band. You must be crazy if you think I'm going to direct a picture like this. I said, Juan, the people have dialogue while they are dancing. They will be talking to each other. You cannot do it and have the music playing after me. Well, he just stormed off the set like a wild man. I knew eventually Van would give in, but it never came to this, because 10 minutes later, I was called into the office of Mr. Lemlin. Mr. Lemlin was flanked by a whole retinue of managers, general managers, studio managers, and others. And he said, Kona, before you say anything, I don't want to hear anything. I want you to fire Von Stroheim. He is out, the picture is off. I had to go to Van and tell him, Van, you surely did it this time. The picture is off.
Now there were few offers to direct, and von Stroheim worked more and more as an actor. Again, he played the man you love to hate, but this time without a uniform. In RKO's The Lost Squadron, he was a mad film director. Even opposite Garbo, he was still asked to play von Stroheim. Finally, from Winnie Sheehan at Fox, came one more offer to direct. A story of Depression-era New York called Walking Down Broadway. To help with the script, Sheehan assigned a young New York writer.
I must tell you that when he called me into his office and told me this, I was in absolute mortal terror, because I'd known of von Stroheim's reputation. Not only his reputation as a very distinguished director, but as a man who made a lot of trouble. Von Stroheim had not done a talking picture. It was rather disgraceful in a sense that a man of his reputation and position had not been offered a picture, and I think Sheehan did it. I think Sheehan wanted it to be an enormous success so he could thumb his nose at Louis B. Mayer. Mayer had sworn a blood oath that Mr. von Stroheim would never work again, and Sheehan taking him was quite a surprise to the entire industry. In any case, he was very articulate about what he wanted in this play. It was a story of two boys and two girls who met and picked each other up on Broadway. Very American, very unlike anything he'd known in Vienna, I would assume, but nonetheless, he wanted to do it. He was determined that I would say and write down and indicate to Mr. Sheehan that this was the most passionate, sexual, violent love affair that there had ever been in the world.
When the picture was finished, it was previewed, and I recall very distinctly one of the most sorrowful nights I ever spent in my life when I went out to see the preview in Glendale, and in the middle of the picture where the audience started laughing. Well, they either didn't understand what Erich was trying to drive at, or maybe they were in a gay mood.
It was greeted with absolute horror. It was said of it, I heard somebody say it, it could only be shown to a convention of psychoanalysts. It was, for that time, the frankest, most open discussion of sexual relationships between people that the screen had ever seen.
The picture was brought back for recutting, and at that time, Saul Wurzel, who was, without any, let's say, artistic, creative talent like Sheehan, he was the one that was going to recut that picture, and when he recut it, it was called Hello Sister, which I never went to see because I didn't want to greet her anymore. I had enough of Walking Down Broadway.
What they did was to get Eddie Berg to rewrite it, to use his long shots, and I had my long shots. And then they just butchered it. They butchered the characterizations. What came out was sheer rubbish. It was criminal. It was absolutely criminal.
As Hello Sister, it was released with no director credit. Few critics noticed and fewer still remembered. Von Stroheim became a back number, a relic of the silent days. And his personal problems were just beginning. In the autumn of 1933, his wife Valerie was severely burned in a beauty parlor explosion.
I always remember my mother saying, well, when you burn, never run. So I stood inside of this booth, and everybody else was crazy. There were 60 people in the shop, and that's where all the stars went. Jean Harlow and all the rest of them. Now, I didn't know what to do. I just walked outside the door and stood in the aisle. And someone said, they were throwing those, when you get in the barber shop, they had those white cloths. They were throwing those on me, but someone said, here's a coat, take this, and put it over her. And it was a star's coat. I could tell you who it is, but I won't. She says, not my coat. I was in the hospital for months.
I never saw a man so devoted in my life.